matter in hand. The University of Wolverhampton has undertaken a project to transform the delivery of software for teaching purposes across the estate. That project was led by Nici Cooper, one of the assistant directors. You'll remember from Adrian's introduction yesterday for IQT that Nici is passionate about people, loves horses, and enjoys retail therapy and food. Spoiler alert, 3 of those things won't be in Nici's session. Please welcome Nici to the stage.
Thank you, Matt. I won't mention horses, food or retail therapy, I promise. I've been quite impressed that nobody's used any notes. I'm going to use notes, because if I don't, I will waffle and I'll go off time, and all the wonderful planning that's gone into this conference will just go out of the door. So I need to keep myself on track. So I'm really thrilled actually to be here at IG16. If anyone had told me 18 months ago that I would A, be leading a project that had a significant technical element to it, and B, presenting at an infrastructure-focused conference on that project, frankly, I'd have called them mad. But anyway, here I am, about to share the story about our software virtualization journey with you all. So, I'm going to start in the traditional way. Just give you a little bit of information about the University of Wolverhampton, or the University of Opportunity, which is our strapline. So we're a largest institution. We've got 3 main geographically dispersed campuses, but we operate across about 30 different sites worldwide across the globe. Many of our 20,000 students, they come from non-traditional backgrounds. We have got a high proportion of mature students. We've got slightly more females than males. So any single males looking for a job, Wolverhampton might be your place. We've got lots of students that are juggling full-time study with parenthood, and a lot of them come from the local region. And there are a number of them that are the first in their family to undertake any kind of undergraduate or postgraduate study, and that brings with it its own challenges. We offer a choice of 500 degree programmes delivered by around 800 staff, and there's a veritable army of manual, administrative, professional and technical staff like us supporting them. So over recent years and currently, it really has felt like our university has just been a permanent building site. And we've got a massive programme of building work going on, part of a £250 million investment. Within the last 18 months, we've opened 2 new buildings and a new automotive engineering centre. Work is now underway on a further 2 buildings, and they're due to open between now and summer 2018. One's an extension to a local science park just a mile down the road. And the other one is redevelopment of a long derelict, what was a former lower level railway station. And that's going to be home to our School of Architecture, a construction UTC, and a centre for manufacturing skills. What the university's paid less attention to while it's been putting up all these wonderful buildings is its digital infrastructure. And there's a £30 million 5-year digital campus programme, and that's designed to make the digital campus as important as the physical campus. So, the digital campus is a programme of projects, and it's transformational in its intent. So, of course, we're changing lots of the technology, but it's also seeking to enable some real cultural change. It's wanting to connect all of our community to the information, the applications, the systems that they need, and it's cutting right the way across people, processes and systems. And it's going to deliver, hopefully, some deep and long-lasting change which will support all aspects of our university's business. It's not about playing catch-up with the sector, although there is a little bit of that to do, but it's about becoming leaders in that technology and that change. So there are 5 foundation projects that were identified that would address long-standing issues and provide the foundations on which to build and deliver further business benefiting change. They've been running since the middle of last year, and Applications Anywhere, which is the name that we gave to the adoption of application virtualization, is one of them. The other 4 are a student portal. So that's going to make it simple for students to access all the information that they need in one place from any device, wherever they are, and let them have real-time information down to those devices. We're also replacing our virtual learning environment. So we're making the switch from our homegrown system, which I think has been in there since about 1999, and we're going to Canvas. We're launching now with early adopters, and we'll go mainstream from the start of next academic year. So our existing system, Wolf, was seen when it was developed as sector leading, but it's way past its sell-by date. It really is creaking at its knees. It's had a particularly bad wobble just this week. Business Intelligence is another one of the projects, and that one is about providing a definitive set of institutional data that's accessible via tailored drillable dashboards. So you'd think it was a relatively easy thing for a university to know the number of students that it's got. Well, not so. Because before this project, it depended on who you asked. So finance would tell you it was one number, and registry would tell you something else, because they use different definitions for defining what is a student. When does somebody become a student? And the 4th one is digital platforms. I'm not going to say any more about that one because I don't want to steal any of my colleagues' thunder for later on this afternoon. Okay. So a little bit of context first. Applications Anywhere got underway really in July last year, and we've now got about 56% of our specialists teaching Windows software delivered virtually through Apps Anywhere, and that equates to about 300 titles, just over 300 titles, and they're being delivered to on-campus university managed devices at the moment. So we've got approximately 5,000 of those endpoint devices across our campuses, and they include a real mixture of hardware configurations of varying vintages, and also included a significant number of thin clients. And it became quite clear early on that that actually posed quite a significant risk to the project. The virtualization and the launch times on the oldest kit were really, really bad, unacceptably bad. And it would have led to a very, very bad user experience, and that's not what we wanted from the first of the projects to really sort of go live. So we made a case, and we successfully secured about £250,000 to replace some of that very oldest kit. And what that's actually done is it's kicked off a rolling PC replacement now, and the first phase of that has already delivered some further improvements. So that's a really good example of how a project can actually act as a catalyst for a wider change across the institution. And it wasn't because we hadn't been asking to do a rolling replacement. We had for quite a long time, but it was just the fact that we said, if you don't do this, this project will fail. Do you want it to fail? Millions of pounds worth, and that really helps to get the change. So the remaining applications that aren't going through Apps Anywhere are being delivered through a number of specialist images. They're either faculty specific, so arts, for example, science and engineering, they both have quite big specialist portfolios. And also if things are limited to particular rooms, or they're on a different OS like Linux. We're already starting to see some benefits. So the size of the 2 faculty images, which was huge, has reduced significantly. And as has the university standard build, not by so much, but we're sort of gradually bringing it down. And that goes across to all staff and student managed devices. We've also used a lot less people resource this year. So last year, for the Apps Anywhere element, just the Apps Anywhere element of the teaching software in year 1, we had 3 full-time packagers. We had a senior packager who didn't actually end up doing much packaging because his job was to make sure that everything was flowing and people had got enough work to do and sorting out issues when they arose. We had 3 desktop engineers who were testing and quality assuring the stuff that was being churned out by the packagers, making sure that it would work in our environment. We had a sysadmin who was dev testing sort of prior to the packaging, and then also organising academic testing and facilitating that. We also had significant contribution from our desktop consultant, for troubleshooting, and also from our technical services manager, who was the tech lead for the project. So it was quite resource intensive. This year, we've reduced that to one packager, one desktop engineer, one sysadmin, and significantly less involvement from the desktop engineer and the TSM. So that's quite good. There have also been some financial savings. So £24,000 this year in one faculty, just by identifying applications that had no or very little usage. And I was quite interested in some of the comments that Adam was making earlier on about do we know the cost of things. It was really powerful to be able to go to the faculties and say, are you sure you want that piece of software? Because it's only been accessed, 4 times, and that's working out at sort of, £4,000 or £5,000 a click. And when you put it like that, it's quite a powerful message. And there's also another £5,000 in that faculty that can go next year because we're stuck on a 3-year licence. And we did that using some really, really basic reporting. But, we'd never been able to do anything like that before we did this project. And so, we're fairly confident that we can continue to achieve year-on-year savings. So we've had a process in place for a number of years, quite a lot of years, that's worked through in order to deliver the teaching that's required for software. And you can see from that diagram there that it's got 6 phases. So it's about identifying the requirements from the faculty. So that's someone or people going out and having discussions with the faculties. What software do you need this year? We usually give them what they had last year, and they go, oh, yeah, we'll keep all that, and then we'll add this on as well, please. And that's quite a long process. And then we qualify what's being requested. So we look at whether it's feasible to deliver that, how are we going to deliver it, what method are we going to use to deliver it. Then we approve the portfolios and authorise the expenditure. That's a bloody nightmare. And there's an absolute industry in recharges and putting things on the finance system that you tell the faculties about, and then they bounce it because they don't understand what they're seeing on the system, despite the fact that you've told them. It's just horrible. We order and acquire the software, then we build and we test the images, and then we deploy them. It's a once per year activity. It's very resource intensive. It usually goes to the wire in terms of delivery, and testing is all a bit hit and miss because it's the time of the year and our academic colleagues are not always around. It also focuses only on the delivery of the academic teaching software portfolios in the teaching spaces. So we have to, the way we deliver software to other people and to other places is different, and it's all a bit messy. And as you can see, there are multiple activities under each of those phases, and some of them are a bit complicated and difficult for stakeholders to navigate. It looks quite linear on the screen, but it's not. There's a lot of to-ing and fro-ing. And there are single points of risk and failure at several stages of the process. So what we're looking to do is to simplify that and make it an all-year-round activity, and to identify and take advantage of and learn from other things that are more mature in our department. So, for example, the way that content is purchased and managed has some similarities. So books and e-resources, that has some similarities with software. There might be some things that we can learn from the way that they are doing that over on the library side. So that process that I've just sort of given you a quick whiz through was actually designed to work across this timescale. So the reality, though, is that we very rarely make much headway in getting requirements from academic colleagues in that slot that's shown on there. Not because they're being difficult, but because they simply don't know what they're going to be teaching that early in the year. We had a discussion with some academic colleagues a few weeks ago, and they told us that sometimes it can be as late as September by the time they've had their appraisals, when they actually know what they're going to be doing. And that means that all the other elements are later starting, and the one thing that doesn't get any later is when teaching starts. So there's this big sort of looming deadline that just doesn't shift and everything gets squashed up. And that usually means that deploying the software is a mad panic, and it's squeezing at the end of the processes. And because the images were getting so massive, it was getting harder and harder to do that. There are really no links to any other university processes, and there probably should be. So, for example, the academic development process, when new courses are designed and resources and things like, well, you know, what's needed to teach that particular course or that module should be identified. So they talk about books, and they talk about electronic resources, and they talk about all sorts of other stuff, but do they ever talk about software? No. Never gets mentioned. So every year we build the specialist images from scratch, despite the fact that about 70% of the portfolio doesn't change. Applications are rarely, if ever, retired, and there are often a number of different applications to do the same thing, because the portfolios are based on individual academic preference. So academic A says, I want this to do my statistical stuff, academic B wants that to do their statistical stuff. And because we haven't been able to provide any usage data, we haven't been able to argue those types of things. And the faculties are quite frustrated by it. So the students have really clearly told us for a number of years that they were not satisfied with getting access to specialist software. So they had to go to specialist labs. So if they wanted to use, you know, software X, they had to go to room Y. And that room might shut at 9 o'clock, and then security would come and start booting them out at sort of 8 o'clock. It just wasn't good. And they couldn't take advantage of the places that had the longest opening hours, like the learning centres, which are 24/7. Our academic colleagues find it inflexible because it means that the faculties really only have one chance per year to say what they want, and it's pretty much, it's really difficult to respond to any changes in year. So if there are licence changes or version updates, or they want a different piece of software to do something with it, it's quite difficult to do that. And the summer window of opportunity for doing the builds and deploying the software is just getting squeezed year on year, with third semester activities, open days, summer schools, etc., etc. And usually by the time we hit the start of the academic year, the result for our staff looks a bit like that. So they've probably worked stupid hours, they've done weekends, they're exhausted, sometimes they're a bit bad-tempered, they have no break before they're back into the day-to-day sort of BAU. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that there's no stress now. There is. But we haven't had to ask people to work beyond their hours, and I think we've all been able to maintain a reasonable level of humour. And that always helps, no matter how stressful things are, humour always helps. So, in terms of what the project was setting out to achieve, the number one objective was to achieve better access to software for the students and the staff, but the students predominantly. There'd been a small pilot in 2014 that was using Application Jukebox, now changed its name to Cloud Paging. I hate it. I much prefer Application Jukebox. It does what it says on the tin. But there's that trendy word, cloud, in there, so it's Cloud Paging. And that was used to deliver a subset of applications to a group of science and engineering staff. And a decision was taken that we would build on that pilot, and so Applications Anywhere was born. Now, as part of my preparation for this conference, was when Matt asked me to speak. I can't speak at an infrastructure conference, I don't know anything about infrastructure. I did think, oh, I better try and understand what this term software defined is. So I took to the internet, and I found references to software-defined data centres, software-defined networks, software-defined storage, but nothing specifically about anything to do with desktops. But I did find a reference to a software-defined workspace, and it incorporates things like user virtualisation. Well, that's on our technical roadmap. And application virtualisation, which is a key part of what we're doing with Applications Anywhere. So I thought, ooh, maybe we are doing a bit of this software-defined. And the information I read also went on to talk about improved responsiveness and better management of applications and licence non-compliance and things like that. And our project is also doing a lot of that. So our project objectives definitely touch on some of these aspects. So without perhaps specifically thinking software-defined, we are starting to move towards a software-defined approach. So specifically, we were aiming to make Windows software applications required for teaching available to students and staff wherever, whenever they need them on a device of their choice. That's our ultimate destination. We were hoping to develop and deliver a solution that would provide our Apple users with an equitable service in terms of access to their apps. I'll say a bit more about that later on. We were going to undertake an audit and assessment of existing and new software applications for their suitability for delivery via Apps Anywhere, and that did actually include getting in touch with software companies to see whether they would have any issues about their software being delivered in a different way. Only one had an issue, but it was good that we asked the question, I think. We wanted to define and develop appropriate monitoring and reporting of software licenses, and as I touched on earlier, we've only done a little bit of that yet, but it is starting to bring some benefits. We wanted to get a process that would enable a whole lifecycle management approach, from request to deployment through to retirement, something we don't really do. And we wanted to embed an agile and well-governed business-as-usual approach to the request, the approval, the delivery, and all of that stuff. And in the business case, we quite often use the term business as usual. But then a couple of weeks ago, our director she went, well, yes, she wasn't too happy when the term business as usual came up, and sort of pointed out that it's not really business as usual. Because if it's business as usual, we won't have changed anything, and we want to change things. So it's kind of business is different, but that's got a bad acronym, so we're not going to go there. You know, the projects are designed to be transformational, so you know, we want to deliver some real business change here. We've got to think about the people aspect. We've got to think about the structure, the people, the skills that are needed to deliver Apps Anywhere, you know, and how that might go in the future. And we have to make sure that our different stakeholder groups knew what we were doing, why we were doing it, and why it would be better for them. Not just that we were messing about with the technology. So we want to move from a one-off piece of activity, even though it spans across a fair proportion of the year, and we want to move to a continuous life cycle. And we really want to focus on the management of applications. So knowing which ones aren't required, making in-year updates. We want to shift more applications through delivery via Apps Anywhere, and we want to increase the availability of the software even more and enable greater agility and responsiveness to the changing needs. And we've had a couple of examples recently where, you know, somebody might say, oh, well, I'm in this room and I need this software and I can't actually see it in the portal, and we can quite quickly make the change to say, okay, let it be visible in this room as well as the other rooms, or you know, something isn't live, can you make it live? And we can do that really quickly. We want to be able to let the academics be able to play with stuff. When we were talking to them a little while ago, that was one of the things they told us that they wanted to do. We want to be able to experiment with things and see whether we want to use it in our teaching. We might want to, but we might just want to get rid of it and use something else. And we can do that better, doing things through virtual delivery. We want to have a continuous service improvement cycle at our heart and be positioned to be able to apply timely upgrades. It's not, you know, that we don't take upgrades, but we sometimes struggle to sort of fit those in with all the other stuff that's hitting you all the time. We want to deliver enhancements to service that will improve the experience of our end user community. So an example of this is that we've got the ability in the hub that we're using to present the applications to categorise them. So students don't always know the name of the software that they want to use, but they generally know the kind of thing that it does. So if we could group applications by the stuff that it does rather than them having to search for names, that would help them. And we want to be able to make recommendations to colleagues on software that might be of benefit to the university community. So it's something we've got the skills to do, but we sometimes don't have the time to do it. And if we can, you know, make some of this other basic stuff quicker, we've got a little bit more time to do that value-adding stuff. So in short, we wanted to be more proactive, we want to drive improvements, we want to inform decision-making rather than simply reacting to the requests. And we wanted to move away from single points of risk or failure to a more dispersed set of knowledge and skills. So the technology that we chose was cloud paging from New Messant. And we purchased it through their European reseller, which is Software 2. And this gave us the option of also adopting their software hub as our application presentation tool. Because we felt that would be a nicer interface for our end users and would give some value to our project. That hadn't been used during the pilot, so we didn't have any existing knowledge of the hub. Other users of cloud paging were using a mixed economy with only a small number using the hub when we actually kicked our project off. There are more of them using it now. But aside from the small-scale pilot, our only other experience of app virtualization was with AppV. And they'd previously deployed that because we could access it through the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. It was fine, absolutely fine for things like Office, but our teaching applications are diverse, they're wide-ranging, they go from open-source development apps through to high-end CAD applications and everything, just about everything in between. And we just couldn't do what we needed to do. So from the outcomes of the small pilot and our experience with AppV, we thought we'd probably do what we wanted to do with cloud paging. So a little bit about the technical infrastructure, although it will be a very little bit, because you know where my experience is, and it's not here. We've got 2 data centres on different physical sites, so it provides a highly available setup of virtual servers. We've got 2 hub servers, 4 streaming servers, 2 repository servers where the applications sit, and 2 license servers that are managing the apps that have got different license requirements. And we've also got 2 database servers that do the usage data, the entitlements, so who can have what, where, when, etc., etc. We also have a non-replicated development environment, one that's internal for us and one that is also accessible by our provider software too. There's also a witness server, and I'm reliably informed that it will say an expletive and take some action when something looks like it's going to go wrong. I couldn't tell you anything more about it than that. And there's a hardware load balancer which manages the traffic and the demand. So if you do want any more information about that, then I have got some colleagues here, Matt and Mo is over there somewhere. Grab them in the coffee break. They could tell you an awful lot more about that than I can. But it's not just about the technology. The lion's share of the work since the project kicked off has mostly been about the technology, the applications, the software and the licensing, the outward comms, but the project's also got other work streams that focus on the people and the processes. So we've got 6 work streams, and briefly they can be summarised around the technology, which was the identification, the procurement, the installation of a best-of-breed solution that was suitable for our needs and our current computing environment. I can't take credit for selecting the solution, application jukebox or cloud paging, because it had already been identified as the best, the only solution to meet our needs before I took over this project. I never doubted it, but I had a devil's own game convincing procurement, who simply could not get their heads around the fact that there wasn't anything else and that there was only one supplier. And we lost several months in sort of arguing really with procurement and trying to convince them that it was going to be okay and nobody was going to challenge us. The application stream was about ensuring that the applications were suitable for going through Apps Anywhere delivery. Yeah, that was that simple really. The process, so up to now we focused really on our internal processes, so the things that we have to do to take an app from being a piece of software, you know, on some media through to being able to deliver it through the hub. But the focus is shifting now, and we're going to define the processes that will support the transition of this project into operation and the changes that are going to be required to bring about some real change. We did an audit of our centrally managed software licenses. That was done as a sort of a piece of pre-project activity. And we also had an initial discussion with one of the university decision-making committees about shifting the funding for software from the faculties into a central pot. Because at the moment we have a mixed economy, so there is some in a central pot, some is with faculties, some is a central pot but recharged out to the faculties, and it is a bit messy. And they gave us in principle agreement to do that, but we have to have a sort of a more in-depth conversation now. It's quite useful because the content does come out of a centralised pot, so there is a precedent and we can use that to have a conversation, say, well, we'd like to model it the way that we do content. Yeah, and then the rest of the activity around software and licensing will be in terms of monitoring and reporting on usage. So something else that I think Adam was talking about earlier on. And that's going to help the faculties to refine their portfolios and hopefully get rid of some stuff. We did actually manage to get rid of some really geriatric applications. We found some that were sort of 12 and 13 years old when we went through the audit, so it was definitely worth doing. The people work stream is about seeking to sort of identify and implement a fit-for-purpose structure and making sure that people have got the skills that they need. And we talked yesterday, you know, the skills base is changing all the time. And comms. So as you would expect in leading up to a go-live, there was a lot of activity in this area. So we presented an overview of the project to colleagues across the department. We briefed colleagues with a remit for academic liaison. We had a desktop icon designed. We launched a set of web pages. We had a massive poster and digital screen campaign. And we also had a pop-up screen on all student computers, so it was right in their face so they couldn't fail to see it. And we continue to sort of talk about what we're doing with the project through a regular newsletter that goes out about all the digital campus projects. And this year, we've put it into the induction packs for new students. So what was the approach that we took for sort of delivering the projects? Well, we had a looming immovable deadline, the start of term. We had, at that point, we had over 400 applications to deliver, a little over 3 months to do it in, and no plan B, because we'd taken the decision that we were not going to do these massive images. And we'd made that decision. And we've kind of gone past the point of no return. So there wasn't an option for failure, really. We've got to do it. We didn't have a lot of time to get established as a project team. Some people had already worked together, some knew each other, so that gave us a really good start. But we were also working with a couple of external packages, one of whom was based in London and rarely came on site. And I hadn't worked directly with anyone. So the normal, you know, forming, storming, norming, performing bits of team formation that everybody goes through, they had to happen quickly, and teamwork was really essential. I only had 3 ground rules. One was work bloody hard, because we've got to do this. The other one was speak freely. You've got an issue, you've got a problem, you bring it to the team and we'll deal with it as a team. And the other one was we're going to have some fun. So we don't have to be miserable and angry while we're doing this. So we also took some, I guess, advice, or we did what the team had been doing for years, in that we colonised a space. Can you move to my? Yes, okay. So that's usually a teaching space. It usually operates as a Mac deck. It's in one of the teaching buildings. It isn't perfect as a working environment because it's a bit noisy, and in the summer it gets really hot. But it is significantly better than the open plan office that we generally operate in on a day-to-day basis, because we just hadn't got enough space in there and the team would have just been constantly interrupted. So we did what they'd been doing for years when they were building the images. We upped sticks and we moved into this space. So we were able to have different areas for different sort of work. So the packages had their area, and the dev testing had their area, and we had a big setup of all the various vintage hardware that we'd got, so we could bring academics in and sit with them while they did their testing. But fundamentally, it meant that we got the right people in the right place, and they could enable effective communications. They didn't have to keep sending emails or making appointments with it. They could just get up and walk over and talk to each other. And we had loads of whiteboards. We relied quite heavily on whiteboards for sort of making, you know, notes about what we've got to do. And it also, we had space to accommodate our extensive supply of Haribos and other sweet treats, which does seem to contribute quite well to team output. So if you can go back again, thanks. We tried to keep things as simple as possible. So we did make extensive use of whiteboards to track progress. We made a note of issues to ensure that everybody knew what they needed to do. We developed a concept of work buckets. I think it was Matt that came up with the term buckets. So we said we've got these buckets and we've got to make sure that we keep shifting things from one bucket to another bucket. And we didn't ever want any of the buckets to be empty because we didn't want anybody sitting there with nothing to do. So could you just go to the bucket slide? Great, okay. So we asked a very clever developer colleague if he would knock us up a little tool. So I literally scribbled it almost on the back of a fag packet. Well, it would have been a fag packet if I smoked, but I don't now. And said, look, we need something that will allow us to track where each of these applications are in their journey. We'd got a good set of processes that had been established over time by the desktop and the technical services team. So we knew the steps that things had got to go through, and we were going to follow that same pattern for Apps Anywhere. So we'd got this sort of validation step about checking the license, making sure it was technically possible to do something. Then we would assign something to the relevant work stream. We wanted to push the majority through Apps Anywhere, but we recognised that there are other ways of doing things. So you can see that at the top. We could mark things about for which faculty they were relevant to. We had an initial development and test phase, and it went to the packagers. It went from the packagers to do some quality assurance, and we could see at any given time where every single application was in its journey. So, the brief to the sort of developer was it doesn't need to look very pretty, but it just needs to do that job for us, and that's what he came up with. It needed to be simple because otherwise people would have worked around it. They didn't want to waste valuable time messing about with recording stuff. We can filter it, so we can put, ticks in the boxes and then get a different view, and we can drill down into each one of them and find out, what the issues are, where it is in terms of academic testing, all sorts of stuff. It worked really, really well for us. So we thought this year, well, we'll use it again. But it hasn't worked so well for us this year because we've had too many variables this year. Last year we were starting everything from scratch. This year we've been doing updates, taking things out, changing licenses, and it's got really, really messy. So it served its purpose. It worked last year. It doesn't work this year. We need something different for future years. You go back again. Thank you. And any issues that we had, and we did have issues, but they were always dealt with as a team. So we had weekly progress meetings, and we also got the external contractor to come in via Skype, and that worked quite well. So we went live with Applications Anywhere at the start of teaching in 2015. And even though it was 3 months of incredibly hard work, the stress levels, I think, were reduced, and there was a phenomenal sense of achievement. Really was. It was fantastic. Some things had to go without testing because the academics just weren't around, or in 1 or 2 cases, we had one of them say, I'm not testing, that's not part of my role, that's your job. And even though we tried to explain to them that, yeah, but we don't know the function, we can test whether it opens, whether it closes, whether it'll save, but we don't know what you want to do with it. No. But anyway, they were made aware of the consequences or potential consequences of their choice not to work with us. What we delivered wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. I think that was a concept that some of my technical colleagues found a little bit difficult because they've got a huge sense of pride and they don't want to deliver something that's good enough, they want to deliver something that's fantastic. But good enough was good enough. We weren't issue-free when teaching started, but we weren't swamped with issues either. And I think that most projects have some issues when they go live. It's a rare project indeed, I think, that doesn't. We've seen a significant reduction in the number of applications that needed to be worked on this year. So last year, 300 plus. This year, around 60. And 20 of those were accessibility applications, and they were outside the scope of the original projects. But our sponsor is the Dean of Students, and he said he wanted them to do them, so we couldn't really say no. So we've done that. And we've also been able to start, in quite a small way, but we're doing it, responding to in-year upgrades. And so we're starting to meet that variety of needs. But most importantly, it's already improving the student experience in terms of getting them access to software where and when they need it. So we've implemented the technology. It hasn't been without its problems, but in the main we've either resolved the issues or we're working with academic colleagues and we've identified and implemented some workarounds. And we know that it has positively impacted the student experience. And I'm just going to spend 30 seconds or so just letting you hear what the experience for one of our students has been. So, thank you.
I'm an intern, I'm doing pharmacy at the moment, I'm in my 3rd year, and Apps Anywhere has really helped me because I'm doing my genetics report at the moment, and we have to use a lot of programs to help write our reports, and it's just so easy. You just go on Apps Anywhere, and I mean, I just write the first 3 letters and it comes up with the options, and it was so easy. Just even if I forgot the name of the program, it actually prompted you what it was, and I've just found it so easy there, and then I was able to complete my report really, and it helped a lot. Well, before, because some of the programs can only be accessed to certain computers, so you had to make sure you go to the right computers at the right time. But now having Apps Anywhere, I mean, I know especially now it's assignment times, everyone's going to be in the library, but I know that I can go to the computer room or even NC and just find a computer, and I can go on Apps Anywhere and use the programs I need, and it's really, really helped me, especially at this time of the year, to complete my report.
Thank you. So, one of the frustrations that had been expressed by the faculty decision makers was that it was difficult for them to get rid of anything because, from the portfolios, because we couldn't give them any usage statistics. And they, to be fair, they've been telling us that for quite a long time. Can't you tell us who's using this, where it's being used, how often it's being used? And we just couldn't. So we just gave them a list of their existing apps and said, you know, there you go, that's what you had last year. Add what you need in this year. And, you know, if they try to say to an academic, do you really need this? The default response, yes, of course I need that. And that's how it was. But this year we gave them a basic set of stats. So we focused this year just on the applications that had received little or no usage. And that's what resulted in that £25,000 or £24,000 saving in one faculty. If we can replicate that across 4 faculties, you've got 100,000 there, like that, very little effort. We'll also be able to start looking at usage trends. So are there particular times of the year when a piece of software is used and it's just sitting there idle at other times of the year? And we want to use that to start to have discussions with suppliers about possibly looking at different license models instead of paying for something for a whole year when we don't actually need it for a whole year. So has it been plain sailing? Well, not entirely. We've had issues with what we felt were unacceptably long virtualization times for some pieces of software. So one of the things that appealed to us about cloud paging, and one of the things that they sort of market it on, is that you can virtualize any piece of software. And we don't dispute that. But I think what we currently think is that there are some applications which are not really very well suited to this method of delivery. The Autodesk and the Adobe suites have been particularly problematic. They're very slow to launch because of their size, but we're having some real problems with the interoperability between the different elements of the suite. So we've been working with our academic colleagues. We've also been working really closely with Software 2 to try and get to the bottom of those issues, and we haven't got them resolved yet. We took a decision last year that we would have to put Autodesk and Adobe back onto the images, but we also left the deployments in Apps Anywhere so that the students who really needed the high-end usage could still get that usage by going to their physical locations, but those that were less power users, if you like, could still access it through Apps Anywhere. So we kind of ended up with a hybrid solution, but we are still trying to work through some of those issues. We've also had to deal with license restrictions. So some of our licenses only have limited numbers, or they're restricted to a specific campus because that's where that course is taught. As well as the hardware restrictions, although that is becoming less of a problem now that we've got this rolling replacement going. At the start of the project, we set out to try and deliver a comparable service in terms of software delivery to our Apple community. We've worked quite closely with Software 2, and they are actually working on a solution that will deliver native Apple apps to Apple devices. But our Apple computers on the student estate, the way they're managed is quite patchy. They're mainly managed by individual faculties, not under the central umbrella. So we eventually decided that we would not try and do that anymore, and that actually that probably needs to be dealt with as a separate piece of work in its own right. So we've de-scoped it, taken it out of the project. There have been a couple of increases in scope to the project. One I've already mentioned, which was the inclusion of about 20 accessibility applications. And that came about from the project sponsor because in response to a change in the DSA funding. So funding used to go to individual students to have money to buy the specialist software, but that's changing and now the responsibility is on the university. But the virtual delivery of those apps is brilliant because we can just make them available wherever they need them, anywhere, to both students and staff. So other people can benefit, because things like mind mapping software, that's quite useful for anybody who prefers to think in sort of images rather than words. And the other thing that we did is, because we had to sort of say, no, we can't really do this Apple solution right now, we were asked whether we could see which Apple software had a Windows version and could we actually include that, and we've done that as well. So, you know, that has been a couple of extra things. So, have we delivered applications anywhere? Well, not yet. We've delivered over 300 applications to 5,000 university-managed student and staff devices on campus. The all apps everywhere is something that we still aspire to, and I'm sure that we will get there. We might not be the first to do application virtualisation, but what we have done is done more in less time than the majority of S2s, or I think any of S2's existing cloud paging customers. So I'm quite proud of that. And our project was showcased at a customer day, and the approach we'd taken was hailed as best practice. So we'll take that. I don't know whether it is, but we'll take it. So, just to sort of finish off, all the digital campus projects, apps anywhere included, are trying to deliver some transformational change. The technology, so in our case, the implementation of cloud paging, it's just the tip of the iceberg, really. And we will continue to enhance that technology side. Only last week we upgraded the cloud paging player to the very latest version. And you might be thinking, blimey, a couple of days before the start of term, really? Well, it wouldn't have been our preferred way of doing a fairly major upgrade, but we were experiencing some really odd issues with blue screens of death. And we then discovered that a university in Belgium was also experiencing the same issue, and it was pinned down to an issue between cloud paging and F-Secure. So, you know, we were pretty much told by Software 2 that the way to fix it was deploying the new version of the cloud player. We've actually gone with a pre-release version, but it's pretty damn close to what will be released at the end of October. So the risks were relatively minor. And actually, it has fixed the issue, but it's also brought us some real significant improvement in performance. So the launch times are much improved, and academics are already feeding that back to us. Wow, this is much faster than last year. So even though it was a bit, seat of your knickers, a couple of days before term, it has paid off. We've also started to do the below waterline stuff. So we've used our experiences to define and document the processes to take an application through all the steps to deliver it, and where that sits in the wider deployment piece. We're focusing now on the deeper stuff around the university business processes, around ownership and structures and the people and the culture changes. So we had some stakeholder workshops recently, and out of that, we spoke to academics, we spoke to colleagues in support service departments, we spoke to colleagues in our own department, and about how we might do things differently in terms of software delivery and the whole management piece. And we came up with a whole series of recommendations, there's about 17 or 18 in total, and they go across themes around planning, liaison, procurement, testing, deployment and management, skills and support and tools. So they're quite wide-ranging. And many of these are not quick fixes, and they touch on activities and processes that are across the whole university. So we're going to have to be careful about our stakeholder engagement, and it's going to be a process of negotiation. But they are things that will ensure that the project doesn't just deliver the technological change, but it will start delivering those deeper process and cultural changes that will enable the business to get some real benefits. So finally then, what next? Well, we'll continue to increase the number of applications that we're delivering through Apps Anywhere. We're aiming for all of them, ultimately. We'll try again with the applications that we haven't been successful with yet, and we'll keep trying until we get them in there. We're working with colleagues across the university to implement the recommendations I was just talking on, so that's just about to get underway. It's easy to say. I think it's going to be much harder in reality to do. But the fact that stakeholders were involved in coming up with those recommendations means that there's a desire to do that, and that's always a good place to start from. And beginning in October, we'll be extending Apps Anywhere to all staff using university-managed devices, both on and off campus, because we're currently only on campus, so we'll be increasing to off campus. And then the next step from that, and it is quite a small step, because I think we will have done most of the sort of the back-end stuff that we need to do, is going to staff and student personally owned devices on and off campus. So we've got lots to keep us occupied and out of mischief. I want to finish just by acknowledging the work that everybody else did. I was the project manager, but you know, that's only a tiny part of what goes on. The real work was done by the people up on that screen. A great cast of characters. I was initially really nervous about leading a project with a team consisting of a high proportion of highly technical people, geeks, but I needn't have worried because they've been absolutely amazing. And I have mostly enjoyed every single minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Nici. I'm conscious of the time, and I really don't want to keep you from any caffeine. However, Nici, myself, Mo, who are all part of this project, will be here for the rest of the day. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to come up and grab us, and we'll happily talk to you about the Apps Anywhere project. And if I could just ask you to once again thank Nici.